Hi there folks, today I'm going to show you how to assemble the USB sequential gearbox. Absolutely everything you need is in front of me. I'll run through it. You need two M8 bolts. They can both be roughly 80 mil long, probably a bit more like 70 mil long, and you can cut them to length. We have three M3 bolts which are 50 mil, but 40 mil will do fine. They can be threaded all the way or like this. It doesn't really matter. Obviously you need 3 M3 nuts to go with it as well, and 6 M3 washers. You will also need 4 self-tapping wood screws. These are 20 millimeters long, and 4 M4 washers. You will also need 2 springs, fairly small springs, but quite strong. These are 25 millimeters long, and they compress fairly easily. 3D printed parts. You've got the body case, you've got the cover like so, you've got the gear knob and stick, which I have already assembled. These are press fits, so give these a good bit of press them together and they should be fine. You've got a couple of different parts for the clamping bit. You've got the foot which goes on top of one of the M8 nuts, and you've got a little handle which goes on the other end of the M8 nut. Let's run through it. So first thing you want to do is, the electronics of course. I've pre-assembled this, but it's an Arduino Pro Micro and 2 large roller switches. And these are, I'm not too sure, they're Patterson. There isn't a model number on them, which is a bit of a pain. 12A, 125 volts. Not that it matters, of course, it's just being used for a tiny little bit. But these are approximately 25 millimeters long and probably 12 to 30 millimeters wide. They're pretty generic. You can find them just about everywhere. And they're quite good quality, really. Not that it matters too much because they're not being wrenched particularly hard. They're soldered to the Arduino Pro Micro. I'll go into more detail about how they're soldered to the Pro Micro in the Thingiverse text and the YouTube text. First thing you want to do is get those in place. So grab your case, grab your electronics, and you've got your self-tapping screws. Now you want the infill to be very, very high on these prints for this reason, which is to use those self-tapping screws to hold the switches in place. So I would position the switches as far into that corner as possible, as far down and to the right as they can go. There's obviously 2 little cutouts here and here for running the cables. So each 2 cables from each switch can run down like so. You want to move it as far down so these big contact points are right up against the bottom. Give you a closer look if it's going to autofocus. Yes, it is. You get a good idea of how it's attached there. I will now. I'll keep focusing. There we go. So now you want to grab your self-tapping wood screws and a washer. Do one at each corner. It's going to be a bit easier for me because I've already assembled this one, so the holes are already tapped. But of course, the first time you're doing this, you will be tapping the hole as you go. And 1. And 2. Try not to overscrew it so you don't ruin the thread of the self-tapping screw. These do hold in place really strong, really fiercely, so you don't need to worry too much about these coming loose. We'll now do the next switch, which is of course in the opposite place but in the same position. The switch is on the other side, of course, but that doesn't really matter. Same again. Grab your washer, self-tap screw. Put it in nice and easy. And the next one. And done. There's a good look for you. Okay, up next you want to get the Arduino in place and get the USB cable in place and put the cover on. So for that, you want to grab your micro USB cable and plug it into the micro. You want to arrange the micro, I'd say, with a little bit of USB cable extra around the side so that you can pull on the USB cable and not worry too much about pulling anything loose on the inside of the device. So a good bit of extra cable in there with the Arduino and with the connector, like so. There is a little bit of cable run in the corner here, so you can run the USB cable out through the wall. You want to make sure that all the cables from the switches to the Arduino going through the little gaps. You don't want any in the way of getting the faceplate on there. Right, now we can talk about these springs and the gear shaft. So here's a gear shaft. The gear knob will just push onto the stick like that. You may find that you might have to sand down the end of the stick a bit, but it should press fit really tight, no gluing. I mean, this really is stuck on very well. Now, in the middle of the case is the central point for the gear shaft. What you may find is that you have to sand down the inside of the hole of the gear stick in order to get it to fit. You want it to be as loose as possible. You don't want any stiffness in there, and you don't want to put any weight on that central point until the faceplate is in place, because there's a recess in the faceplate that holds the shaft in place. So I'll go ahead and stick that on like so. As you can see, that is now in place. Now that you've got the stick in place, you want to put the springs in. Now, the springs that you get should be such a good size that they fit in between. Are you going to focus for me? Are you going to play along here? Yeah, there we go. They should fit nicely into the roller, behind the roller, and behind the right-hand wall of the switch, like so. And you might want to do this after you put the gear stick in place. You don't want to do this before you do, because then the springs might push the roller out and ruin the switch a little bit. Now, they don't need a point to hold them in place. They should just hold in place quite nicely on their own. You don't have to worry about them going anywhere. They can't get out of there. As you can see, it's sort of got that nice clicky, flicky, quite stiff movement to it. If you want to make it stiffer, what you can do is put some little pads in there to bring the spring out, compress it more. That way you have a stiffer action. You can also upgrade to, you know, beefier springs if you want. It's completely up to you. Quite a light feel is what I like, so these screws really aren't too tactile, too pressy. Okay guys, we're now going to go through the attachment of the table clamping mechanism. Now this works by having two bolts forcing against each other. You want the one bolt on the closer side. I would install this one first, the one closer to the unit. It's going to go through at the top, and it's going to have the washer at the bottom. So go ahead and stick the washer in the recess there, so that the nut can pull it into place. Can you see that? Yeah, go ahead and stick the nut in there. Go ahead and push the washer through, push the bolt through, sorry. You're going to want to tighten it up, but not too much. You don't want to pull the whole grip too tight. That's going to start breaking plastic, which is not what you want. But I'm just going to make sure it is fairly tight. There you go, really not too tight. As you can see, the two sides have started clamping towards each other, just a little bit, started bending towards each other. That's good, that shows the bolt's firmly in place and it should grip the table well once everything's installed. Okay, the next bolt. The first thing you want to do is go ahead and install the handle. This should just press fit really quite well. It's a really tight fit, so just give it a bit of a push and it should stick in there nicely. If you want to go ahead and use super glue or epoxy, go ahead, but I find that it sticks really well just through a bit of pressure. Okay, next thing you want to do is, that's so you can see it, go ahead and install the nut in there and push the bolt through there. You can also epoxy these nuts in place if you want. You might find that you get a better grip action because the bolt won't be wobbling around if it's stiffly in place. It's up to you. You might find also that you have to tap. I'm having to tap the bolt through the plastic of the hole a little bit, but that doesn't really matter. Keep on tightening. There we go. Okay, so that bolt has started coming out of the nut, like so. I then go ahead and screw it all the way to the top of the clamp, or near the top, so you can get the foot in and then really screw that into place. Okay, so it's nearly at the top, so I'm just going to take the little foot, push it onto the screw like that, so it's just sitting on there. You might just tap it a little bit, and then just go ahead and tighten this thing right up, so that the can't focus. There we go, so that the foot gets pushed right into the bolt. Okay folks, now we're going to go ahead and attach the faceplate to the device. First thing you want to do is make sure your cables are run correctly, make sure none of them are between the box and the faceplate, make sure they're all hidden away in their grooves like that. Make sure USB cable's well in place. One thing I have had to do to this faceplate that you may have to do to yours, depending on how the screws you use, I've had to drill some little extra holes in there which allow for the head of the self-tapping screws to have somewhere to go, or they could be pushing the faceplate out. So that's how I decided to go about it. Okay, let's go ahead and stick it on. It should be a fairly nice fit. You should feel the central point of the gear stick fit into its recess, so that it's got so that it's not taking the weight from just one end of the point. Okay, first thing you want to do is get the middle bolt in. Don't forget your washers. First washer goes on. Now the first time you drill these, it will be extremely stiff. You are actually tapping the thread as you're going, so a cordless drill will make neat work of this, but the first time you do it, the bolt will get very hot. Be warned, you don't want to touch that bolt. Once it comes out the other side, it's going to be very, very hot. Okay, there we go, let's tap through. As you can see, this screw is probably, oh, I don't know, 15 mil longer than I really need it to be, but rather too long and too short, right? Okay, washer on, and then the nut can go on, nice and tight. Again, be careful because that whole assembly is now quite hot from drilling through the plastic, so that's nice and tight now. Go ahead and do the two corner screws now. Top right hand corner one. So, in there, drill it in. Oh, don't forget your washer. What you might find is that you can't screw it in all the way because, of course, this particular nut is non-threaded in part of it. So once the threaded side comes out, the middle bit isn't threaded, so it has no reason to kind of pull that way. So best thing to do is to stick the nut on, the washer in the nut, and use the force of the nut to pull it all the way through. There we go. That will close the faceplate up nicely so it sits flush with the case. And then the last bolt. Again, we're going to pull it through with a nut. Oopsie. There you go, nice and tight. So what you can do is, if you've got a Dremel, you can obviously trim these end bits off if it bothers you. If not, they're not going to get in the way of any kind of operation of the shifter, especially since it's going to be on the right hand side of the steering wheel, so not really an issue. Okay, last thing is the table clamping mechanism. Now, one issue with this thing is that it can only clamp onto a very small table, so I'll get into that in a moment.